The rain fell like tears from heaven that night. Each drop seemed to carry the weight of broken dreams and shattered hopes. In the grand kingdom of Valdoria, where golden towers touched the clouds and silk banners danced in the wind, a girl named Seraphina pressed herself against the cold stone wall of an alley. Her once beautiful dress hung in tatters. Mud stained the fabric that had once been pure white. Her long golden hair, which used to shine like spun sunlight, now hung limp and dirty around her pale face. "Please," she whispered to the empty night, "don't let them see me like this." Just 6 months ago, Seraphina had been the most envied girl in all of Valdoria. She was the daughter of Duke Aldrich, one of the richest men in the kingdom. Every day, she wore gowns made of the finest silk. Jewels sparkled around her neck like captured stars. Servants waited on her every need, but that was before the fire. The fire that took everything. The fire that the people said she started. Now she had nothing. No family, no home, no hope. The sound of horse hooves on wet cobblestones made her heart race with fear. She pressed deeper into the shadows, hoping the darkness would hide her shame. But fate had other plans. Prince Adrian pulled his black horse to a stop just outside the alley. He was returning from a long journey to the neighboring kingdom. His mission had been simple: find a bride. His father, the king, had given him an ultimatum: marry within a year or lose his right to the throne. Adrian had met many princesses on his journey. They were all beautiful. They were all proper. They were all perfect. And they were all completely boring. Something glinted in the alley, catching his eye. A piece of broken glass reflected the moonlight. But as he looked closer, he saw it wasn't glass at all. It was a tear on someone's face. "Who's there?" he called out, his deep voice echoing off the stone walls. Seraphina's blood turned to ice. She recognized that voice. Everyone in the kingdom knew Prince Adrian's voice. Strong, commanding, royal. "Please," she begged, pressing herself harder against the wall, "don't let them see me like this." But Adrian had already dismounted his horse. His tall frame filled the mouth of the alley as he stepped into the shadows. His dark hair was wet from the rain, and his blue eyes searched the darkness until they found her. When their eyes met, something magical happened. Time stopped. The rain seemed to pause in midair. The world held its breath. Adrian had expected to find a beggar or a thief hiding in the alley. What he found instead was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. Even covered in mud and rain, even dressed in rags, she glowed with an inner light that took his breath away. "My lady," he said softly, taking a step closer. "Are you hurt?" Seraphina wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the night and never be seen again. But something in the prince's voice stopped her. There was no judgment, no disgust, only genuine concern. "I'm nothing," she whispered. "I'm nobody. Please, just leave me alone." "Nobody?" Adrian smiled, and even in the darkness, his smile seemed to light up the entire alley. "I don't think that's possible. You have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen." Seraphina's heart began to race, but not from fear this time. No one had called her beautiful in months, not since the fire, not since she lost everything. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I'm Seraphina Aldrich. Or I was. My father, he's dead. My family is gone. Everyone thinks I'm a killer." The name hit Adrian like a lightning bolt. He had heard the story, of course. Everyone in the kingdom had. Duke Aldrich's daughter had supposedly started a fire that burned down their entire estate. The Duke and Duchess had died in the flames. The daughter had disappeared. Most people believed she had run away out of guilt. But looking at this broken, beautiful girl in front of him, Adrian knew the truth was much more complicated. Tell me what really happened, he said, extending his hand to her. Seraphina stared at his hand for a long moment. It was clean and strong, with long fingers that had never known hard work. Everything about him screamed nobility and power. Everything about her screamed poverty and shame. I can't, she whispered. I can't let you get involved. It's too dangerous. Dangerous? Adrian raised an eyebrow. I'm a prince. I think I can handle a little danger. Despite everything, Seraphina almost smiled. Almost. You don't know my stepmother. The word stepmother sent chills down Adrian's spine. In his experience, stepmothers in fairy tales were never good news. What about your stepmother? Seraphina closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with such pain that Adrian wanted to pull her into his arms and never let anyone hurt her again. Lady Vivienne married my father 3 years ago, Seraphina began, her voice barely above a whisper. At first she seemed kind, but after the wedding, everything changed. She wanted me gone. She wanted to be the only woman in my father's life. The rain began to fall harder, and Adrian noticed that Seraphina was shivering. Without thinking, he took off his black cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm and smelled like cedar and rain and something entirely masculine. Thank you, she breathed, pulling the cloak tighter around herself. Continue, Adrian said gently. What happened the night of the fire? Seraphina took a shaky breath. Lady Vivienne had been planning something for weeks. I could feel it. She would watch me with these cold, calculating eyes. She would whisper to her personal guard, Sir Marcus, when she thought I wasn't looking. What kind of planning? I think she wanted to kill me. The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would make them hurt less. The night of the fire, she gave me tea before bed. Special tea, she said, to help me sleep better. Adrian's jaw clenched. He was beginning to understand where this story was going, and he didn't like it one bit. I drank the tea because I trusted her. But something was wrong. The tea tasted bitter, and soon I felt dizzy and sick. I tried to go to my father, but I couldn't move. My body felt like it was made of lead. She drugged you, Adrian said, his voice hard with anger. Yes, but the drug wasn't strong enough, or maybe I was stronger than she thought. I heard footsteps in the hallway, then I smelled smoke. Seraphina's voice broke on the last word, and tears began to stream down her face. She set the fire while you were drugged, Adrian said. It wasn't a question. I tried to save them, Seraphina sobbed. I tried so hard, but the fire was everywhere, and the smoke was so thick, and I couldn't breathe. I found my father in his study. He was already gone. And my mother, my real mother's portrait, was burning on the wall. Adrian couldn't stand it anymore. He reached out and pulled Seraphina into his arms, holding her while she cried. She was so small and fragile against his chest. How had she survived such horror? How did you escape? He asked softly. Sir Marcus found me, she said into his chest, but he didn't save me out of kindness. Lady Vivienne had ordered him to make sure I died in the fire. He tried to knock me unconscious, but I fought back. I managed to get away, but not before. She pulled away from Adrian and pushed up the sleeve of her tattered dress. On her left arm was a long, ugly scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. He cut me with his sword as I was escaping through the window. I almost bled to death that night. Adrian traced the scar gently with his finger, and Seraphina shivered at his touch, but it wasn't from cold this time. You're so brave, he whispered. So incredibly brave. Brave? Seraphina laughed bitterly. I've been hiding in alleys and stealing food for 6 months. I'm a coward. No, Adrian said firmly, cupping her face in his hands. You're a survivor, and you're the strongest person I've ever met. Their faces were inches apart now. Seraphina could feel his warm breath on her cheek. She could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. She could feel her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. I should go, she whispered. If anyone sees us together, it will ruin you. Let them see, Adrian said. I don't care. You will care when your father finds out you've been talking to a suspected murderer. Then we won't tell him. Adrian's voice was low and husky. We'll keep it our secret. Secrets are dangerous, Your Highness. Adrian, he corrected. My name is Adrian. And yes, secrets are dangerous, but sometimes they're also necessary. A new voice cut through the night like a knife. How touching. Both Adrian and Seraphina spun around to see a figure emerging from the shadows at the other end of the alley. Sir Marcus stepped into the moonlight, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Seraphina's blood turned to ice. The man who had tried to kill her 6 months ago was standing not 10 feet away. Sir Marcus, Adrian said coolly, what brings you out on such a wet night? Marcus smiled, but it was a cold, cruel expression. I've been looking for something that belongs to my lady. Something that should have burned 6 months ago. I don't know what you're talking about, Adrian lied smoothly. Oh, I think you do, Your Highness. Marcus took a step closer. You see, Lady Vivienne has been very patient. She let the little mouse run free for a while, thinking she would die on her own. But mice are surprisingly resilient creatures. Seraphina pressed closer to Adrian, and he instinctively moved to shield her with his body. What does Lady Vivienne want? Adrian asked. What she's always wanted. For the last witness to her crimes to disappear forever. Witness? Adrian's mind raced. What witness? Marcus laughed. Didn't the little mouse tell you? She saw everything that night. She saw Lady Vivienne set the fire. She saw her murder the Duke and Duchess. She's the only person who can prove what really happened. Adrian turned to look at Seraphina, and she nodded miserably. I saw her do it, Seraphina whispered. The drug wasn't strong enough. I was conscious when she came into my father's study. I watched her pour oil around the room. I watched her light the match, and I watched her lock the door so he couldn't escape. So you see, Your Highness, Marcus continued, this isn't just about a runaway girl. This is about justice. And justice demands that all witnesses be silenced. Adrian's hand moved to his own sword. I won't let you hurt her. You won't let me? Marcus laughed again. You're just one man, Prince, and I have friends. As if summoned by his words, 2 more guards stepped out of the shadows. They wore no royal insignia, which meant they were Lady Vivienne's personal men, mercenaries, who would do anything for gold. Adrian quickly calculated the odds. 3 against 1. Not impossible, but not good either, especially with Seraphina to protect. Run, he whispered to her. When I give the signal, run as fast as you can. I won't leave you, she whispered back. You have to. You're the only one who can prove Lady Vivienne's guilt. If you die tonight, she wins. Marcus was growing impatient. Enough talking. Kill them both. The 3 guards drew their swords and advanced. Adrian pushed Seraphina behind him and drew his own blade. The steel sang as it cleared the scabbard, and moonlight danced along its edge. Now, he shouted and lunged at Marcus. But Seraphina didn't run. Instead, she grabbed a broken piece of wood from the ground and swung it at one of the other guards. It cracked against his skull, and he stumbled backward with a curse. I told you to run. Adrian yelled as he parried Marcus's first attack. And I told you I wouldn't leave you, Seraphina shot back. ducking as the second guard swung his sword at her head. The alley erupted into chaos. Steel clashed against steel, boots splashed through puddles, curses and battle cries echoed off the stone walls. Adrian was a skilled fighter, but Marcus was experienced and ruthless. They danced back and forth across the narrow alley, their swords sparking with each impact. Meanwhile, Seraphina found herself facing two guards with nothing but a piece of broken wood. She was fast and desperate, but they were trained killers. One of them managed to grab her wrist, and she cried out in pain. The sound of her cry sent Adrian into a rage. He fought with renewed fury, driving Marcus back step by step. "You picked the wrong girl to fall in love with, Prince," Marcus sneered as their blades locked together. "No," Adrian replied, shoving him backward. "You picked the wrong girl to threaten." With a powerful thrust, Adrian's sword found its mark. Marcus looked down in shock at the blade piercing his chest, then crumpled to the ground. But the other two guards still had Seraphina cornered. One of them raised his sword to strike the killing blow. "Seraphina!" Adrian shouted, but he was too far away to help. Time seemed to slow down. The sword began its deadly arc towards Seraphina's head. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. But the end never came. Instead, she heard the sound of more hooves on cobblestones. Then she heard voices shouting. Royal voices. "Halt! In the name of the king." The king's guard had arrived. The two guards released Seraphina and tried to run, but they were quickly surrounded. Within minutes, they were captured and bound. Captain William of the King's Guard approached Adrian with concern. "Your Highness, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Adrian said, sheathing his sword. "But this woman needs protection. She has information about the fire that killed Duke Aldrich and his family." Captain William looked at Seraphina with surprise. "This is the Duke's daughter? The one everyone thought was dead?" "Very much alive," Adrian said firmly. "And under my protection." "Your Highness," the captain said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this at the castle. The king will want to hear what she has to say." Adrian nodded. "You're right. But first, she needs food and proper clothing. She's been living on the streets for 6 months." "Of course, Your Highness." Adrian turned to Seraphina, who was staring at everything with wide, disbelieving eyes. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I promise." "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me? You could have just walked away." Adrian reached out and touched her cheek gently. "Because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were someone special, someone worth fighting for." Seraphina felt tears welling up in her eyes again. But these were different tears. These were tears of hope. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go to the castle. You tell your story to my father, and we make sure Lady Vivienne pays for what she did." "And after that?" Adrian smiled. "After that, we figure out the rest together." The journey to the royal castle took less than an hour, but for Seraphina, it felt like entering another world. She rode behind Adrian on his horse, wrapped in his warm cloak, watching the familiar streets of her childhood pass by. Everything looked different now. Smaller, somehow. Less intimidating. Maybe that was because she wasn't alone anymore. When they arrived at the castle, servants immediately began bustling around them. Hot baths were drawn. Clean clothes were brought. A feast was prepared. Seraphina couldn't remember the last time she had felt so overwhelmed by kindness. "I don't deserve this," she told Adrian as they stood outside her assigned chambers. "You deserve so much more," he replied. "You deserve a lifetime of kindness to make up for all the cruelty you've endured. Your father will want to see me tomorrow." "Yes, but don't worry. I'll be with you every step of the way." Seraphina nodded. then hesitated. Adrian, yes, thank you for everything, for saving my life, for believing in me, for seeing me as more than just a girl in rags. Adrian stepped closer to her. Seraphina, I need you to understand something. When I found you in that alley tonight, I wasn't just saving your life. You were saving mine too.
What do you mean?
I mean that I've been searching for something my whole life without even knowing what it was. Purpose, meaning, love. He cupped her face in his hands again. And then I found you, and suddenly everything made sense. Seraphina's heart raced. Adrian, I feel the same way, but we barely know each other. I know enough, he said softly. I know you're brave and kind and strong. I know you've survived things that would have broken most people. I know that when you smile, my whole world lights up. But I'm nobody now. I have no family, no title, no fortune. What can I offer a prince? Everything, Adrian whispered. You can offer me everything that matters, your heart, your love, your truth. Their lips were only inches apart now. Seraphina could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She could smell his masculine scent mixed with rain and leather. If I kiss you, she whispered, there's no going back. People will say I'm using you. They'll say I'm a gold digger who seduced a prince to save myself. Let them say whatever they want, Adrian murmured. I know the truth, and the truth is that I'm completely hopelessly in love with you. Adrian, kiss me, Seraphina, please. She didn't need to be asked twice. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and gentle at first, then growing more passionate as they lost themselves in each other. Adrian's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. Seraphina's hands tangled in his dark hair. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Wow, Seraphina whispered. Wow, indeed, Adrian agreed, resting his forehead against hers. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we tell your story to the king. We make sure Lady Vivienne is brought to justice, and then, Adrian smiled, then I ask you to marry me. Seraphina's eyes went wide. Adrian, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. But we just met. So, my parents met at a royal ball and were engaged 3 hours later. They've been happily married for 30 years. That's different. They were both royalty. And now you will be too. Seraphina shook her head. Adrian, this is crazy. Your father will never approve. The people will never accept me. My father wants me to marry someone who will make me happy. You make me happier than I've ever been in my life. Adrian took her hands in his, and as for the people, they'll love you once they know your story. You're not just a survivor, Seraphina. You're a hero. I don't feel like a hero. Heroes never do. That's what makes them heroic. Seraphina looked into Adrian's eyes and saw nothing but love and sincerity. This man, this prince, genuinely believed in her. He saw her not as broken or damaged, but as someone worth fighting for. Ask me again tomorrow, she said finally. After we face your father, after we deal with Lady Vivienne, after we see if you still feel the same way in the cold light of day. Adrian smiled. I'll feel the same way in 50 years. We'll see. Yes, Adrian said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. We will. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the storm had washed all the darkness from the world. Seraphina woke in the most comfortable bed she had slept in for months, wearing a nightgown made of silk so soft it felt like wearing a cloud. For a moment she wondered if the entire previous night had been a dream, but then she saw Adrian's cloak hanging on a chair across the room, and she knew it was all real. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. A young maid entered. carrying a tray of food that smelled like heaven. "Good morning, my lady," the maid said with a curtsy. "Prince Adrian asked me to bring you breakfast. He also sent these." She gestured to a wardrobe that hadn't been there the night before. It was filled with beautiful dresses in every color imaginable. "He had them brought from the finest dressmaker in the kingdom," the maid explained. "He said to tell you that a princess should dress like a princess." Seraphina's heart fluttered. Even when he wasn't with her, Adrian was taking care of her. After breakfast and a long luxurious bath, Seraphina chose a dress of deep blue silk that reminded her of Adrian's eyes. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. Another knock at the door revealed Adrian himself, dressed in formal royal attire. "You look beautiful," he said, and the way he said it made her believe it was true. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "Are you?" Seraphina took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The throne room was enormous and intimidating, with soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that painted rainbow patterns on the marble floor. King Edmund sat on his golden throne, looking every inch the powerful monarch he was. But when Adrian introduced Seraphina, the king's expression softened with compassion. "My dear child," he said kindly, "we all thought you had perished in the fire. Where have you been all these months?" With Adrian's encouraging presence beside her, Seraphina told her story. She spoke of Lady Vivienne's hatred, the drugged tea, the fire, her desperate escape, and the months of hiding and fear. She also told the king about the previous night's attack, and how Marcus had confirmed that Lady Vivienne was the real killer. When she finished, the throne room was silent for a long moment. "These are very serious accusations," the king said finally. "Lady Vivienne is now one of the wealthiest women in the kingdom, having inherited all of your father's estates. I know, Your Majesty, but everything I've told you is the truth." "I believe you," the king said, surprising her. "Your story explains many things that never made sense about that night, and Marcus's confession before he died corroborates your account." "He confessed?" Adrian nodded. "Before he died from his wound, he told Captain William everything, how Lady Vivienne hired him and his men, how she planned the whole thing, how she's been hunting you for months." "So what happens now?" Seraphina asked. "Now," the king said, rising from his throne, "Lady Vivienne will be arrested and tried for murder. Your father's estates will be returned to you as his rightful heir, and you will take your place as one of the most powerful duchesses in the kingdom." Seraphina felt dizzy. After months of having nothing, she was suddenly being given everything back. But more importantly, the king continued with a small smile, "My son tells me he wishes to marry you." Seraphina's cheeks burned red. "Your Majesty, do you love him?" The question was so direct that Seraphina was taken aback. But looking at Adrian's hopeful face, she knew there was only one answer. "Yes, Your Majesty, I do." "And you, Adrian? Do you love her?" "More than life itself, father." The king nodded approvingly. "Then you have my blessing." But, he held up a hand, "I want you to wait 6 months before the wedding. Let the dust settle from Lady Vivienne's trial. Let the people get to know Seraphina as she truly is, not as the mysterious girl from the fire." 6 months? Adrian looked disappointed. 6 months, the king said firmly. "Use the time wisely, court her properly. Show the kingdom what a remarkable woman she is." Adrian bowed. "Yes, father." The king turned back to Seraphina. "And you, my dear, use these months to heal from your ordeal. Learn to be happy again. Learn to trust again. And most importantly, learn whether you truly want to be a princess." "I understand, Your Majesty. Thank you for your wisdom and kindness." It's the least I can do for my future daughter-in-law." The words sent a thrill through Seraphina's heart. Daughter-in-law, princess, wife. 6 months ago, she had been living in alleys and stealing bread to survive. Now she was going to marry a prince. But as she looked at Adrian's loving face, she knew that the real miracle wasn't becoming a princess. The real miracle was finding someone who loved her exactly as she was. Lady Vivienne's trial was the event of the decade. The entire kingdom watched as the truth finally came to light. Witness after witness testified to her cruelty and greed. The 2 surviving guards confessed everything in exchange for lighter sentences. Lady Vivienne maintained her innocence until the very end, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was found guilty of double murder and sentenced to life in prison. During the trial, Seraphina's courage and dignity impressed everyone who saw her. She testified with grace and honesty, never seeking revenge, only justice. The people fell in love with her story. Here was a girl who had lost everything, survived months of hardship, and still found the strength to seek truth over vengeance. Adrian was right. They did love her. As the months passed, Seraphina grew into her role as a duchess. She reopened her father's estates and used her wealth to help other orphans and homeless people in the kingdom. She established schools and hospitals and soup kitchens. But most importantly, she and Adrian grew closer every day. They spent hours talking about everything and nothing. They rode horses through the countryside. They danced at royal balls. They fell deeper and deeper in love. On their wedding day, exactly 6 months after their first meeting in the alley, Seraphina wore a dress that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Her hair was adorned with diamonds and pearls, but she had never looked more beautiful than she did when she smiled at Adrian as he waited for her at the altar. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the priest asked. "I do," Adrian said, his voice ringing with joy and certainty. "Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Seraphina looked into Adrian's eyes, the same eyes that had seen past her rags and mud to the person she truly was, and smiled. "I do." When they kissed, the entire kingdom cheered. That night, as they stood on the balcony of their chambers, overlooking the city, Adrian wrapped his arms around his new wife. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up your quiet life for all this chaos and responsibility?" Seraphina leaned back against his chest and smiled. "Never. But do you ever regret it? Falling in love with a girl you found in an alley?" "Never," Adrian echoed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "That girl in the alley was exactly who I'd been searching for my whole life. I just didn't know it yet. I love you, Prince Adrian." "I love you too, Princess Seraphina." And as they looked out over their kingdom, where the lights in the windows twinkled like earthbound stars, they both knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the darkest places. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, a prince will find you in an alley and see that you're beautiful even in rags. The end. But wait, there's more to this story. 5 years later, Princess Seraphina stood in the same alley where she had first met Adrian. But this time, she wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was there with a purpose. "Are you sure about this, my love?" Adrian asked, watching as workers began tearing down the old, crumbling buildings. "I'm sure," Seraphina said, her hand resting on her rounded belly where their first child grew. "This alley saved my life. It brought us together. Now it's going to save other lives too." The alley was being transformed into a beautiful garden with a shelter for homeless women and children. A place where people who had lost everything could find hope again. Above the entrance, a plaque would read, "In the darkest places, love can bloom." Adrian put his arm around his wife and smiled. You know, I still think you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen that night, even covered in mud and rain, even begging not to be seen. Especially then, because that's when I knew you needed someone to see you. Really see you, and I wanted to be that person. Seraphina turned in his arms and kissed him softly. You saved me, Adrian. No, he said, touching his forehead to hers. We saved each other. As they walked away from the construction site, hand in hand, neither of them noticed the young woman watching from the shadows of another alley across the street. She was thin and dirty, dressed in rags, with desperate eyes and tears on her cheeks. But as she watched the prince and princess walk away, their love evident in every step they took together, something stirred in her heart. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet either. Maybe tomorrow, when she found the courage to step out of the shadows, someone would see past her rags to the person she truly was. Maybe her prince was just around the corner. The cycle continued, as it always does in fairy tales. Love finds a way. Hope never dies. And sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings start with the words, "Don't let them see me like this."